So let me just begin by saying we're in a little bit of a different setup tonight. We are in the cafeteria here at JP Case because our Wizards is setting up for the Wizard of Oz, calling them the Wizards because they have been practicing so much for the performance. And those of you that are in person have the poster on your table. They had a practice session tonight, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't interrupt them for their rehearsal. They've got a show tomorrow night for our senior citizens and our faculty and staff. And then they have their opening night on Friday night and a show on Saturday night. So that's why we're in the cafeteria tonight and not the auditorium. And because we have this different setup, we aren't able to walk around with microphones like we did for the first town hall. So when it comes time for those of you that are in person, if you want to ask a question, ask that you come up to a table with a microphone and you your question there, and you can sit at the table. If all of the 8 seats get filled up, wait your turn, ask your question, and then you will go back to your seat in order to open up the seat for somebody else. So that's the way we'll work our questions tonight. I am going to go through a few slides, and I recognize that most of you are here because you want to ask a question in person, but I also know there are some of you that want to see some of the information that either you've heard your community members, your neighbors, your friends asking questions about, or maybe you've seen them posted online. I want a chance to talk with those of you that are in person and join about the questions that we've been asked, both as a Board of Education and as the superintendent. And again, use that QR code and you'll be able to have all the slides and refer back to them when we get to the question and answer part. So we are sharing with lots of members of the community. I've been asked lots of questions about what is Flemington-Raritan all about. We know that members of our community know about our school district. You have children that go to school here, you live in the district, but for some of the people that are talking to Flemington-Raritan, they're not as familiar with the district. We've been in the news, not only on some of our more tap into local news, but we're also getting inquiries from other places. So I wanted to make sure when we present our town hall that they've got information about what makes Flemington-Raritan such a wonderful place to live and to have a child going to school here and to work as a staff member and faculty member. So we are a pre-K through grade 8 district. We serve 3- and 4-year-old children at 3 off-site preschool locations, and students in our preschool are provided this high-quality, thorough education at 4 of our elementary schools as well. We have 5th and 6th grade students that are receiving their education at our intermediate school, and our 7th and 8th graders are right here at JP Case. We have a vibrant and diverse growing school community. We talk about frequently how much our community has grown with the variation of students that are attending schools here at Flemington-Raritan Regional School District. We're also very prominent with extracurricular competitions. We've won championships both locally as well as farther in our state rounds. We've got many different learners here. We offer a unique variety of support for all of the unique learners that are here in Flemington-Raritan. We have multi-programs for our multilingual learners, as well as different levels of mathematics. Students here at JP Case take courses such as Algebra 1 and Geometry. Our students begin learning about a foreign language in elementary school, and that continues all the way through 8th grade. We also have many classrooms that are in class and pull-out resource classrooms, classrooms that are self-contained preschool disabilities. We have transition and life skills classes for students with special needs. And we have a multitude of staff members with a variety of exceptional skills and all sorts of documentation with their certification that makes them such high-quality educators. We have reading specialists, we have child study team members, school psychologists, social workers, LDTCs, in order to provide all of these learners that need additional support. We didn't talk yet about how we have nurses and guidance counselors. We have physical and social emotional students that continue to need lots of support, not just from classroom teachers, but from other professionals that work here in Flemington-Raritan. Our students are supported both in and out of the classroom. What I mean by that is they receive additional support, sometimes out of the walls of our school district. Some of our students attend school off-site locations. We also talked about our sports programs. We have athletic competitions here. Last year, we saw many of our athletic students receiving awards both in basketball and other sports as well. So all of this makes such a wonderful place for Flemington-Raritan to live and to have your child enrolled in our school. In fact, as of today, we have 3,311 students ages 3 all the way up through 8th grade. We have a growing staff, 682. I'll talk a little bit about that. I know that's been some questions in the community. And we've also heard from our community members about what's changed. How has Flemington-Raritan grown and varied over the past 6 or 7 years? And it's no surprise to anybody that works or lives in our community about this changing demographic. I've talked frequently about the 125% change of students in the multilingual, where English is not their first language. Because of this, we've had to change a little bit the way that we have recruited and tried to attract teachers to come to Flemington-Raritan. Teachers that have specialized degrees such as multilingual and ESL support. Other degrees as well have been really challenging because of this national language, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. This is not a new slide. It breaks down our schools to tell our families and community members what's different from school to school. Francis A. Damar has our largest percentage of economically disadvantaged students at 45%. Next year, they will be the only Title I school in our district. Robert Hunter is losing its Title I status. We have students that receive speech, which is why you see a breakdown, the difference between special education and special education with speech only. Students are classified as special education if they receive speech services. Other students are classified as special education and they might not have speech services. They might have other learning disabilities, but you can see the breakdown of percentages here, and this has grown as well. The number of special education students has grown over the past 7 years. If we look at the average, we're about 20% special education of all of our 3,300 students. So here's where we're talking about staff growth. There has been questions in the community about why do we have so many more staff members than we did previously? And about the recruiting, how we're doing recruiting a bit differently in order to make sure that we've got teachers to fill vacant positions. And one of the things that we did was last year we instituted a grow your own model. This was a way to help us make sure that we could fill positions by using our teacher assistants and paraprofessionals and training them to be teachers. And just this year alone, we were able to hire 6 of our teacher assistants, otherwise known as paraprofessionals, to become teachers into the district. So that number has, our paraprofessionals used to be outsourced to ESC. They are now part of our faculty here, and so that number has grown. This has not been the best cost-effective way to keep our numbers low with what we're paying for our Department of Ed with something we call PERS, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We learned over the years, watching those numbers closely, that this, while it's helping us fill some positions, has added to our costs, and you'll see that breakdown in a few more slides. So Mrs. Dawson, our business administrator, thought it was important to review the history about budgeting and what's happened in the state of New Jersey, beginning back in 2010, all the way through where we are today. So we've given you a roadmap. And the roadmap, we're going to start at number 1, and allow me just to spend a couple of minutes here, and Mrs. Dawson. So let's talk about before 2010. So we had a School Funding Reform Act that was drafted in 2006. It was implemented in 2008, which is why I started number 1 with before 2010. This was legislation that was aimed to provide equitable school funding in New Jersey. It addressed disparities among districts, and it used a weighted funding formula based on student and district needs. It's otherwise known as the SFRA. It's a weighted formula that determines adequacy budget for school districts. We have fair share, which is delegated to us by the state of New Jersey. So what the state of New Jersey decides based on this adequacy budget and fair funding formula is we receive as our fair share. But however, that formula and that calculation method remain unclear. And the New Jersey legislators have been bringing forward information about changing that. And that will do us good as well as many other districts. So we're going to move to 2010. This was when aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So remember, we had banks that collapsed and New Jersey experienced massive budget cuts. I was a teacher in Montgomery Township at the time, and anybody that was a teacher back in 2010 remembers the budget crisis that happened and how many teachers lost their jobs. The state governor significantly reduced school funding, and you're going to see that on an upcoming slide where Flemington-Raritan's budget went down. Moving into the upcoming year, we had our S2 bill. Mrs. Dawson, do you want to talk just a little bit about the S2 bill and where we are with number 2 up there, what happened in 2011?
You want me to go back to?
Well, we want to talk about how in 2011, how the state of New Jersey significantly reduced the amount of funding.
Yep. So what happened in 2011, again, after seeing the recession going on at the time, prior to that, remember our budgets used to be voted on in April so that the public would have the say. We didn't have a cap on taxes. One of the reasons why they instituted the new bill back then was to try to slow the growth down and the increase in taxes based on what the economic situation was then. That's when the 2% cap came into play, and that's when they moved away from the public having to vote on our budget. It now moved from an April election to a November election, and so long as districts stayed within this 2% cap, there were some adjustments, or the state allowed for certain allotments. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So that's been the funding formula and what's been in effect to today. We have a 2% cap, and what that means that we can't raise the tax levy outside of 2%, regardless of, of anything else that may be going. With the exception, the state does allow for certain allowances. So if a district is seeing growth or if a district is seeing some extraordinary expenses that are not typical, the state will then say, and this is all predicated on them, X school, we acknowledge that you're seeing this increase. We're going to allow you X number of dollars. But again, they're not giving it to us in the amount of state aid. They're still taking that burden and passing it on to the taxpayers. So that's kind of where we end up in steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it brings us actually to where we are with 5. So as we continue to move through the roadmap there, and we have this information a little bit more detailed in the later slides, you will see that the budget remained within 2-3%. And those are the reasons why the tax levy has been within that range there, because of the funding formula that we're seeing right now in place.
Then we had last year during our preliminary budget presentation, we had members of the public that were asking us, why didn't we go out for a vote? Why didn't we allow the public to vote on what the budget was like? And the reason that we didn't do that is because the law wasn't in place yet. That's number 6. Talk about that a little bit, Mrs. Dawson.
Yep. So prior to the law being signed, September of this year, the school districts were able to do special elections. And we know that from our referendum passing back in 2018, a referendum for capital projects is the primary reason school districts will go out for a special election or special question. If a district wanted to raise its taxes above the 2% and you were not holding an April election, there was no options. The state didn't give us an option to do so. So when we were hearing the public last year say, why didn't we go to increase it? That was not an option. It did not become an option until September of this year. And that's because I think the state is starting to recognize that it's not just Flemington-Raritan. There are a lot of other districts throughout the state that are also a similar issue. It's hard for us to maintain percent when everything is just costing a lot more. Think about it. We dropped to 2% back in 2011, and this was after us seeing, the lowest rates we've had. Think about what was going on at the time. Happens, we're seeing inflation. I know people are tired of hearing that, but these are the facts, right? We were still held to just having 2%, and they never adjusted that. So I think this is one of the ways the state is trying to help districts out and going above the 2% cap. And what this new law did was it allows the district to ask the voters prior to the budget being approved by the district to see if they could go above the 2%. And that's where we are today with the March. And the significance with the date is there are only 4 times a year that we can hold special elections. This is governed to us by the Department of Education. They come out every year with a special election calendar. This is all public information. We have it listed on our website. You can go there and it'll tell you exactly when you have to do these special elections. It tells you the requirement that the Board of Elections needs to have it at least 60 days prior. So if we're doing a election in March, we need to have everything approved by January. And prior to that even happening, the Department of Education also gets involved, and they also have to be a part of the process in approving the question. So it's not just a matter of, why didn't we have this available in November? It wasn't in time. We wouldn't have had the information to do anything in November. The earliest you could have done it would have been December. And again, going through the process, it was going to take some time to get everything approved. Talking to the county office, there's a lot of coordination that happens to try to hold a special election, given the new law that was just passed in September.
Thank you, Mrs. Dawson. So let's look at the next slide. So we received some questions at the last town hall about where has the budget been over the past couple of years? How much has it changed from 2015 and so on moving forward? So we've got another slide coming up on our next slide that shows where we are with the budget. And I wanted to give members of the public that are here and those who are at home a screenshot that shows where the budget was 2014. That's been some of the years that we've heard at previous town halls, all the way to 2024. At the bottom, we tell you the number of students that were enrolled in 2014 and the number of students that are enrolled today. And in short, yes, it does cost more to educate students than it did 10 years ago, as it does for schools across the state. So let's look at a couple of other slides. And again, you have all these on your phone to go back. So I'm not going to spend a long time with all of these numbers, but you can go back to them. So here's the audit numbers at the top. Here's the operating budget increase from year to year. We're going to look at that slide again in a minute. Here's the state aid difference from the previous year, moving down all the way to the bottom. And here's the total aid. Let's keep going and show you the next one. This is the same slide as the previous one, just showing you the growth rate and moving up. This is a slide that shows you where the budget increase was from the previous year. So I took that data that was on the larger slide and gave it to you in a bar graph, and also showed you where the schools were closed to COVID. So why would our operating budget percent be so much lower in 2019-20? Because remember, so many of our students went home and we were operating school with kids that were primarily at home. And then the next year moving up, and then you see the 1 year where we had 8.19% operating budget. That was the year that we received our ESSER funding and our American Rescue Plan funding that had to be spent by the end of the 23-24 school year. And you can see our operating budget last year. So I'm going to keep moving forward just to make sure that we've got lots of time to have with our question and answering. Changes in state aid. Remember, we talked about that roadmap and 2010 and 2012, where the district lost so much funding because of what was happening in the state. Look at Flemington-Raritan, how they lost $2.5 million, and the changes in the state aid moving forward. So here's no change in state aid, meaning we didn't get any additional money moving forward. This is when we had a whopping $33,000 more than the year before. And then you can see how we've lost funding over the course of the last 5 years. Here's COVID to 595. We lost money 2 years prior. And then last year we received 549,000 more than the previous year. Same slide again. There's been questions about when did McGann become superintendent and why has our changes in state aid been different because of when she started being superintendent. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with what the state allotment based on that school funding formula and the S2 and our fair adequate funding. Smaller graph just showing you the most recent years. This one is our tax levy percentage increase. So Mrs. Dawson was describing that roadmap. She talked about how far above we had gone 2%. So look over the past, let's look at 2015. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can see it very well. Here's 2015. So the tax levy percentage increase was 4%. Here's the district staying at 2%. We went up a little bit higher at 2.83, staying steady. 2022, we went up to 2.2. And then the past couple of years, you see where we are. I made a note because in 2022 and between 2022 and 2027, we settled our teachers' contracts and our administrators' contracts, and those settled at 3% and 3.5%. And then we marked also when the state law changed to that 2%. I'm going to keep going. We had questions about inflation and how much has inflation rose in our United States. And everybody knows how much inflation has really challenged us as living here in New Jersey as well as in the United States. And we've seen inflation rise 33.5% since 2015. So does it cost more to educate kids now than it did in 2014-15? Yes, it does. There's also been questions about capital reserve balance. How much do we have in capital reserves and why don't we have more? Where is all the money? So we've given you the capital reserve balance by year starting back in 2010. These are on our easy budget. They also are on the Department of Ed website. We had to do a little bit of research here for 2014-15 to find out what did Flemington-Raritan spend some money on. And we looked at reports from the superintendent at that time, and the superintendent reported that there were full day kindergarten was instituted. There were HVAC repairs and blacktop upgrades and drain repair and so on. So they spent some money to do that. Capital reserves stayed about the same. We went down just a bit. That in 2018, we did a partial repair on the Reading-Fleming roof. This was before the 2019 referendum passed. And then if anybody has children that are in 5th grade or higher, you know we dealt with mold and mildew in all 6 of our buildings, and that was astronomical costs. So we had a reduction to address all the mold and mildew issues in our building, and then we had the referendum. So our board put some money back into capital reserves, and you can see where we are today. And if you have questions about that, we can come back to that. Everybody knows about our special election. I'm going to skip that slide. I'm assuming you all know about our interpretive statement. You've probably seen this slide before too, because we've talked about that even if the special question passes, the 6% increase in the tax levy still doesn't balance our budget. It will help us balance the scales a bit more. And we gave you the cost of only our contracted salaries, our state required benefits, which means our healthcare benefits, and the operations and maintenance for our 6 buildings. Just those items alone come up to $5 million, which is above the 2% tax levy. Here's our average home. You've probably seen this in some of the information that we have distributed out. And if you have questions, you can use the QR code and we can come back to that. Mrs. Dawson talked about how we are very cost conscious here and we are spending lower than our K-8 districts in Hunterdon County. We spend $19,310 per pupil, less than our surrounding schools and almost the best in all of Hunterdon County. We only have one spending lower growth rate, and that's Lebanon. And I also talked about our high school VOTEC, which also has a little bit lower spending than we do. So Flemington-Raritan's looking pretty good when we look at per pupil costs. This talks about how challenging it is. We've been asked questions about what are the major influences that budget our decisions and what are the 5 main accounts that are higher. If you've read my letters, you've seen those. Salaries, healthcare cost, maintenance, special education. And what's our 5th one, Mrs. Dawson? Maybe transportation. Yep. So those are our 5. I listed them here. In addition to some of the ones we've talked about in the last 20 minutes. Transportation, we announced and we were very proud to say that we have a good momentum moving forward with Hunterdon Central. Any of you that had read previously about the Joint Transportation Committee dissolving, that was happening last fall, August, September, and really came to a head in the wintertime. We've had a very good momentum with Flemington-Raritan and Hunterdon Central. We announced at the last board meeting that we believe that that partnership is going to remain and we'll be transporting our students together, just like we have done in years past for the 25-26 school year. And that is great. And we're very appreciative for Hunterdon Central board members and their new superintendent, Jessica Cangelosi-Haid, which has helped to move that forward. Preschool, we've talked a lot about preschool. If there's a question in the room, I'll come back to that and allow you to answer, or I'll answer some questions about preschool, but this just gives you information about year 1 and year 2. Anybody that might have listened to Governor Murphy speak last night, you heard him speak about the additional, I think it's 35 or 60, a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. 58.1. Thanks for the shout out. $58.1 million into preschool again. Billion.
That's not all to preschool though. Preschool is 1.2 billion, I believe it was.
Budget is big, but not just as preschool. Yes. So we can talk about preschool if people have questions about that. So you have the slides, the process for Q&A, just a real quick review again. If you have a question, we're going to ask Mrs. Brune and Mrs. Haver to help us facilitate. We're going to bounce back and forth between people that are virtual and asking questions and people that are in person asking questions. And all of the panelists here will take turns answering questions that you bring to the table and you are still wondering about.
Okay, for our question format, like Dr. McGann mentioned, just because we have a wire this time, if you would like to raise a question, I please invite you to either table, myself here or Stephanie there. And you can come up at any time. There's 8, we'll rotate and try to get as many questions as we can in. And we'll also share to see if there are any virtual questions as well. So maybe Ralph, if you can give me a nod and we'll go to there too. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Victor Sloan. I'm a resident taxpayer. Both of our daughters went through FRSD. I think they were well prepared for high school. I'm not sure when I look at the budget proposal and what you've been doing, what the previous board's been doing, I could say the same for the students coming through now. First of all, my first question is I'm struggling to see how the numbers add up. I looked online, I found a couple of average salaries. So $74,000 a year times 30, that's 2.2 million before you add the security guards, the JV sports, and the benefits. The second question is, you blame state aid, but when I look at the graphs that you showed, it's really oscillated 100,000 here, 200,000 there. That's a rounding error in an $80 million budget. And you had a couple of years with significant increases. I recognize one of those was for COVID. When you guys were asked for a detailed budget, you said, we can't provide it because we don't know what the state aid is going to be. But we just learned that it's decreased about $100,000, which again is a rounding error in an $80 million budget. You've added a lot of staff, and a lot of those staff have not been certificated student-facing staff, even though student enrollment stayed pretty flat. And lastly, and I think perhaps most importantly, you said on your slide, expenses exceeded revenues. That's another way of saying you spent beyond your means. Other districts in the area have spent within their budget. Most of the past 6 or 7 years, you guys have overrun your budget. So for me, it's really about trust. How can you ask us to trust you to live within your means when you haven't done it in the past? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So I'll go back a couple of slides because I think the community member was asking about the budget. So I'll go back to one of the slides where we talked about the budget. We also heard that there are districts around us who are living within their budget. I talked to a lot of superintendents and they're exceeding that 2% cap. But what they're doing is they're using either capital reserve, not capital reserve, they're using banked cap, or they're using something called supplemental allowances. Districts receive possibly 2 potential supplemental allowances. One is they may receive a supplemental allowance based on higher healthcare costs, and the second is higher enrollment. So when you look at other districts, if they're above that 2%, they're doing it either one of 2 ways. One, using banked cap, money that they've saved aside, or 2, they're using supplemental money that they were allowed to use from the state of New Jersey. Anything I'm missing on that, Mrs. Dawson or board members, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd like to add. First, I want to thank you for the question. Those were all really good questions, and you bring up good points. It is true that there are some school districts that have been able to stay within the budget. That is true. There are also school districts in New Jersey that are selling schools. If you look at Jackson, they're looking at selling a second school within 2 years. So we're not there, okay? But we're trying to, obviously salvage the situation. As you mentioned yourself, if you look at the amount of state aid we've had, it could be in just a statistical error as far as how much we're receiving. To that point, if we're receiving the same amount every year and we're not adjusting for inflation or the fact that we're getting a 3.5% contractual raise to our teachers, we're going to fall behind. So it's finally catching up to us.
Thank you. How about an online? Do we want to
Virtual question?
Yeah, I want to answer a
Okay.
virtual question.
Would anyone like to read the virtual question?
So I can see one. It says,
Thank you.
what is the student population for K-8 students? But that's 3,303 or 7 or 11, 3,311. It says, is the preschool paid for by the state or in your annual budget? So that's been a common question. So preschool, if we have students that are preschool students that are special education preschool students, they're required to get an education here in our school district. That's federal, state law. If we have students that are regular education preschool students, they are funded by the Preschool Expansion Award. And I think there's confusion in the community about that. I think not everybody understands that if they're a special education preschool student, we're required by code to provide them that thorough and efficient education as soon as they turn 3 by October 1st, I believe it is.
Hi, my name's Herjo, and I'm a local resident of Flemington. 3 kids that go to the school district, and number one is, especially with this election coming up on November 11th, there's a lot of misinformation at the local forums, like Flemington United, all these other Flemington groups. And I wanted to know what you guys are doing to tackle that misinformation, because people are saying this special election was done on purpose, and it really undermines the message of voting, for our kids. And I know what you guys are doing to really reach out to the community and the citizens and tell them, this information, but they're not joining the town halls or the Board of Ed meetings, but there needs to be an outreach. And is this possible, especially right before the election? The second question I had was, when you guys received federal aid for COVID, it was known that it's going to be temporary. And I feel that if something is given like a bonus and it's temporary, why wasn't it not forecasted in the budget for the upcoming years? And I think there was a ball that was dropped big time for our kids. And in the last meeting, there was, I believe, Dr. Bentley and Mr. Birkenstock, you guys mentioned that you guys have a 5-year forecasting budget that you're working on. And I wanted to know what you guys have planned and what the steps are to ensure that this remains a strong district and that we don't lose more funding and we don't lose great teachers that are supporting our students and helping them succeed. Because once our ratings go down, it doesn't just affect students, it affects the whole township, and it affects, people that are paying taxes for their homes and when they have to resell the homes. So it's a whole, I need to know as a citizen what you guys are doing to make sure that the ball is not dropped and the ratings do not go down.
Thank you very much for the question. Does anybody want to start, or would you like for me to just
I can
start?
start backwards and answer the first question and answer
Okay.
your last question about the 5-year
Okay.
budget. So the 5-year budget is something that we really want to take a look at this year, right? And not to say that this wasn't done in previous years, but much more of a focus on it was going on this year and moving forward here, just because of the obvious situation that we're in. So yeah, a big part of that is making sure that we have some kind of sustainable budget moving forward. And it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I've said this on a number of occasions now, where at some point we will be in this position again, right? The numbers simply don't add up. The math is if we're above in our salaries and our healthcare expenses, and that's already over our allowable 2%. Point we're going to be here again, right? But the goal is to at least plan for that in the next 5 years, so we don't have to come back and we're eliminating positions again, right? Ideally, in that next 5 years, something changes legislatively, because without any changes legislatively, we're going to be in this position, just like any school is going to eventually be in this position again. So in that 5-year budget plan, one of the major things that we're talking about is obviously not eliminating positions, hopefully, but also incorporating capital projects, maintenance of our buildings. We simply haven't had the money to do it. So if you walk over 100 feet to the gym floor is not in great condition. The roof leaks. The entire roof of this building needs to be replaced, and that's an $8 million project. So these are the things that we're talking about, making sure that we're including in that budget, just so we have a more sustainable future here in our district. As far as the misinformation, that's a big, we obviously spoke about. It's difficult for us to, as board members or even the district, to try to get on social media, but there are a lot of advocates for us out there. Major things again was to have these forums. We took to heart what everybody said last year, right? We listened. We weren't, we didn't like the way things went down last year either. That's the honest truth. We hate the fact that we have to eliminate positions, but we want to get the word out as much as possible this year and try to get the truth out, which is why we have forums just like this. And then also obviously our board meetings and our family engagement and all the other committees that we have on top of that. So I will let Dr. McGann continue with that misinformation part, and then.
Thank you. All right. So let me talk a little bit about the federal funding, because one of the questions that she asked in her 3-part questions was talk a little bit about COVID funding and what did we spend it on and actually drop the ball. So one of the items that we did spend a significant amount of our federal ESSER and American Rescue Plan funding on was mental health support for our students. We hired Effective School Solutions, and they were in Robert Hunter as well as Reading Intermediate School, as well as JP Case. And we had to cease partnerships with last many families that were very upset. That was a significant part each year, both the first year that we received COVID money as well as the second year. So there's an example. I'd like to give you an example also of something that we spent money on that's still here, and those are our one-to-one devices. So during COVID, all school districts got extra money to buy one-to-one devices for students because they were home and they all needed a computer to be able to work and learn. And we still have those. And those continue to be needed to be swapped out and updated, or our technology supervisor is here. There's a lot of funding that goes into that. So we'll see if we can continue with that. We also purchased something called NWEA and our MAP. Those are internal assessments. That's about a $75,000 line item that we used COVID and ESSER funding for in the first year that we have absorbed into the budget. It's a very important tool for us to diagnostically understand where our students are, not just relying on New Jersey Student Learning Assessment. So we do still have that one. As far as personnel, we did additional guidance counselor to support students with their mental health. Unfortunately, we have to reduce some of those positions. We've got 2 positions that we're reducing moving forward. They're on our agenda for tomorrow night. We had an additional technology member that we hired with our ESSER and ARP funding. That person was reduced last year, and we had another person that was technology team that took a job elsewhere that we didn't in place. So funding has ended. We had to buy a lot of things in order to get our schools back open. And if I'm forgetting anything, I'm sure Dr. Burns or a member of our board would jump in and remember an example. So just to piggyback a little bit more on what our board president was saying about how do we attack misinformation, there is a lot out there, and I appreciate our community member recognizing that. We aren't spending money on mailings to get information out. We're trying to rely on our community members to share information, both on social media websites to get correct information out there. And we have a lot of people that are doing that for us. We can only do what a school district is allowed to do. That means we can post things on our district website and update it frequently. We can do town halls. We can have frequently asked questions documents. We can pass out information at school functions. We could send out mailings, but we're not going to do that because we just don't want to spend the money to do that on these limited times that we are in. Okay.
Is there a virtual question?
Oh, is anybody ready to take one of those virtual questions? I'm monitoring, but I was also answering.
So one of the virtual questions, and I think it might cover potentially a couple questions that I'm seeing here potentially, is did you retain a supervisor for the transportation under the budget for the 2024-25? Are you limiting that position if you recover traditional joint transportation? So we had just hired a transportation supervisor in the anticipation and preparation for the fact that it was dissolved in the first place. So we obviously would need to have our own transportation supervisor to run our own program. That being said, we are keeping that person on board because we believe that things will run maybe a little bit more efficiently, which is, I believe, to answer another question, it would actually be less cost-wise. So we believe there may have been some inefficiencies in our routes, and we think with our own transportation supervisor looking out for our own interests, able to answer the phone when somebody calls, that things can move a little bit smoother and a little bit more efficiently on our end, saving some money. So yes, that person will be remaining, and we do still believe that a cost savings will be realized moving forward, regardless of whether we rejoin with Hunter Central or not. Did I answer that properly? Or enough?
No, I think that was a good way to explain. I think the other thing we're looking at as we reconvene our agreement with Hunter and Central is to, it may look a little bit different than it had before, So while that is a position that we're going to be keeping in district, it's not going to be one of those positions that's shared. So if Hunterdon Central keeps their person, we keep our person. Remember that currently, the way it's currently set up, all of the personnel in the transportation office at Hunterdon Central is billed 50-50, meaning we pay. So those dispatchers, the people answering the phones, we the salaries for that. The bus drivers, we pay the salaries for that. The operations of transportation, Flemington-Raritan currently pays for a portion of that. So we're going, while we're looking at the structure of it, it's going to look a little bit different. And that's going to be one of the differences that we have, is to keep the position that we have here, and they'll keep their positions. We'll have someone there will oversee the operations for the K-8 district, and they will have someone that will oversee the operation for the high school district.
To jump onto that really quickly. Again, as you mentioned, we are paying a 50-50 cost share. Part of that 50-50 was paying for the transportation supervisor there, which was a higher salary than I believe the one that I have right now. That being said, that cost difference there, it's not a full the full amount that we're paying for ours, right? It's the
Correct.
difference between the two. And again, we think it's for our interest that we're looking out for our interest and making sure that, you know, again, somebody's there answering the phone, somebody there is there handling our business, you know, and looking out for us. So.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin Sahacky. I'm an employee of the school district. I live in Hillsborough. I want to speak to districts in the area. Hillsborough went out to referendum last year. I live in a townhouse, one of the cheaper homes in Hillsborough. My taxes went up significantly. It's not only this district having issues with budget, it's other districts also.
Thank you. We heard one of our board members mention Jackson looking to sell schools. We see other districts in South Jersey that are also really dealing with significant budget crises. We took a different stance with it this year, taking advantage of this new change in the law and asking our community members, if you want smaller class sizes, if you want class 3 officers in schools, if you want to keep JV sports, then this is how much it will cost to do that. Okay, thank you. For the next question.
Hi, my name is Jake Shaw. I'm a data junkie. I'll tell you that right now. So I look at numbers, I look at how these numbers are figured out, everything. And I was looking at the numbers and not everything made sense. Probably just not everything was clear to me. So I apologize for that in advance. But the one thing that did stick out was one, that there was a $5 million jump from 2022 to 2023 school year. So, which is fine, understandable, right? COVID hit, everything was fine, understand. Why was that continued to increase from that number and not the decrease from the COVID funding that we were given by the government, right? Question number one. Two, this is a 33% inflation increase. Fine. My salary has not increased 33% from that time. My salary has probably increased maybe 4%, right? That's two. I'm going right back to what slides I see. And what I want to say is, I'm not saying that we don't need this money. What I'm saying is that we need to evaluate what the budget is, how it's gotten there, and why it's gotten there. So it's not a matter of why is it that? It's a matter of the ground level, the substance, the foundation of what has caused us there. I think that interpretation and that understanding for the folks over here, myself, will help quite a bit. Increase due to COVID. Okay, so I think somebody mentioned over here, please look yourself. COVID was accounted for in 2023. Again, why wasn't it balanced out at that point? Was that COVID? We hired employees for COVID money. Didn't we think that we were gonna keep going and keep employed, right? That should have been accounted for in that sense, I believe at least. People may disagree, but that's my thought. Two, as private companies out there, me working for one of them, we hire contractors, right? Those contractors are hired because we do know that, yes, they may cost initially a higher amount, but we're not paying for their benefits. So aren't there ways of working the budget where we as a community are hiring contractors, lowering our top line budget, making sure that, hey, look, if I'm not letting go of somebody that I care about. I think it was your point, Mr. Dawson, Ms. Dawson, right? Not Doctor, Ms. Dawson. To your point, we pay 50% one person, 50% another person, right? We're sharing that cost. Well, can't we carpool or something? Can we figure something creative out within our community here as a Flemington-Raritan district? If you live beyond, make these number up, please do not quote me, 7 miles away, hey, I'm sorry, what's your name? Laura, would you like to carpool with my son? And we have a few people. Hey, let's get an Uber and a big van. The people who need the school bus will take it there. Just creative ways, and not saying, again, creative ways to solve the budget issue. Yeah, that'd be great. The last thing, so as a private companies, there's always folks that are at the higher end who make quite a bit, right? Then there's feet to the ground. Feet to the ground mean people who are in my manufacturing, or they're in the floor, they're working on operators, et cetera. Guess what? If they leave, that my profits are going down, so I can't sell products, right? Why are we not using the same concept with our children? Which is much more important to me with a parent of a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old than person who is. I can tell you right now, if we balance out one person up here, we can save 3 lives down there who are teaching our kids. So don't look at number as a number, I understand. Let's get to the root of the cause of where the numbers are coming from. And then we can have a budget talk that kind of speaks to where it is. I apologize, I said a lot more statements than questions, but I'll go back to the question. I know what we're thinking of is the difference between the 2 years. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And comments are allowed too. We certainly welcome. I was trying to take some notes about the questions. So we're going to unpack a few at a time and anybody jump in. So I'm going to start with the back. So we talked about like boots on the ground and reducing people at the top to keep people that are have a lower salary. In a school district, we have
Lower salary, but higher importance for our kids.
right. But the challenge with that, and I recognize that we do that when we, but the challenge with school districts is you have people that are tenured and they bump other people. So it's not as simple for me to just say, I'm going to reduce Laura because she makes however much money. Somebody over here who earns a lesser salary because Laura is tenured. So school districts are challenged by that. We did reduce some of our supervisors, and there's pros and cons of that. But even in that case, we couldn't say, okay, supervisor number 1, you make a high amount. We're going to get rid of you and we're going to keep supervisor over here that makes a lower amount because of the tenure rights and the bumping. That's part of the challenge that schools have to deal with.
Like the assistants, the superintendents as well.
They get tenured, but not tenured yet. Dr. Burns is not tenured yet.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about, things like that. And
Yep.
and you're saying that some are tenured, some are not. So what we need to do, which is fine. Okay, list A, tenured, list B, not tenured.
Right?
It's creativity is what I'm trying to
Yes.
get at.
So let's talk a little bit about creativity and trying to find creative ways to balance the budget. Some people ask us about, well, apply to more grants, bring more grants in, will help offset the cost of the budget. There's lots of grants out there. We've received 3 more today that the board knows that we're not allowed to disclose yet. But it's interesting the way grants come about. They're usually for very specific items. They're not to pay for teachers and payroll and food services or custodial or electric or things like that. They come in for like STEM, so STEM grants. So we try to be creative, but when you get down to the nuts and bolts of this is how much teacher salaries cost and this is how much benefits cost, there's little creativity with that. We do contract. So we contract for our custodial, we contract for our food services, and we contract for some teacher positions. And yes, they don't take benefits, but their salaries are usually higher than if we hired a teacher to do that same position. For example, a speech language pathologist. So we have some contracted speech language
Mhm.
pathologists, and their salaries are usually, their contracted rate is higher typically. Teachers' speech language pathologist rate. Now, we don't pay the benefits, but we often don't get them 5 days a week. We get them for 3 days a week. Can you think of anything else, Mrs. Dawson, about contracted employees or the way that we've been creative to
So, I-
try and solve the budget?
So, but yeah, we do outsource when we can, right? So like Dr. McGann said, our food service is outsourced. We do have our custodians that work in our buildings. They're also outsourced. They're not employees of the district, although everyone sees them and we get to familiar with them. They are here. So those are two different ways. You can.
Bunch of salaries then, or?
No, they're excluded. They're excluded. They're going into a contracted line. So, and that's just by law, that's just how they have our accounting codes, and we kind of put them into professional services line, which is like an 11,320, and that's kind of where they get paid out of. So no, they're not in the salary lines for the district. Talking about budgets and where going, glad you asked that question because I'm new to the district, not to the position. I've been doing this over 18 years now. And one of the things that when I go into a district that I like to do is the zero-based budgeting. And what's that? Because I get to find out where all the money is. We start building from the bottom and then we kind of go through it, right? So how does that look? Well, I know what my known costs are. My biggest costs are going to be my employees. I start plugging them in. I have them listed by building. I have them listed by grade level. I have everything. It's all clean and orderly. And next I have it's what are my costs? I look at what my costs are. I look at what my trends are. I look at what my loss rate. We go into the details to try to come up and make sure that we have and we are getting competitive quotes. We are getting good rates. We switch from being self-insured to private insured last year. It went into effect this school year because the cost of being in that program was no longer beneficial to the district, right? So there are things that we can do. And then we go look at facilities and maintenance and what it takes to run the operations of 6 schools. And we go into the electricity and we go into the, workers' comp and we go into liability insurance and we go into, everything else that are fixed. That's how we build the budget. We kind of go from there. Once you start putting in all your fixed costs, there's very little discretionary funds left. Right. So yes, I can say that I have done analysis. I can identify where it all is. It's a lot of our costs are in fixed costs with the school districts. And this is not just unique to Flemington-Raritan. This is if you go and you ask other districts exactly the same, they'll tell you most of everything that is budgeted in a school district is in fixed costs. Right. So that's where we kind of try to see where within those fixed costs can there be some control over it, right? So that's kind of the process that we go through. Once we go through there, then we have to, evaluate where those expenses are, revenues are, and you try to balance the two. When we did that preliminary early on with the finance committee, it's one of the very first things we did. I can take our projections for this year. I can take where the salary lines are. I can put 3.25% on top of that. I can kind of see where we are with electricity costs, put 20% there. I know what the health benefit numbers came in, 15% there. Go to each line item, start doing that. What's in the budget are actual costs. And when you start putting those percentages on top of that, you'll see easily where that 5 million comes in the increase of the budget.
The 5 million stadiums. Going back, there was from 2021, 2022, there was $295,595. Sure.
And in 2022, 2023, again, in the back, it was $67,397,432. I'm not asking just to find out why that difference is, because that's COVID does not account for that much at that time. COVID, if that was something that inflation was 33%, I understand, but it was not 33% back then. So where was that? I understand you're doing that now, but understanding why we are where we are, because you're going forward of what you've seen from the past going forward. I think we need to look at is going back a little more where that biggest differential was, and then move forward. again, not questioning the total budget,
Mhm.
questioning the why.
Mhm.
You know, are there any dead spots in the closet I have to know about? Something like that. So we need to figure that out why first. And again,
Understood.
students' lives matter most than the money it goes. Our students are our future. So I am not, again, stating anything about the budget. It's again, why?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone want to try an online question? We're watching the time.
Well, actually, before we do that, I just want to add a couple things because you brought up a lot of points, and I can't answer. I had been on the board for a little over a year. I do not know the answer to that question as far as what happened during that time period. If I did, I would tell you. What I can tell you is I am in private practice, and I understand all the points you have made. However, we are handicapped. Dr. McGann mentioned about, tenure, seniority. That's one of the things. Another thing has to do with contractual raises. You mentioned maybe my salary went up 4% over the past, X amount of years, whereas we're contractually obligated to pay our teachers a 3.5% raise year after year. So how are we going to tackle this, and what's our 5-year budget plan? Well, we have to go back to the table with the teachers union, right? There are things that we're going to put into our 5-year plan to try to, make this a sustainable, situation. The other issue is benefits, which is one of our biggest expenses. And with benefits, last year we switched insurance companies. But one of the things that I was suggesting that we do is maybe we don't offer the Cadillac plan that costs $40,000 per family for these teachers. Actually, more than that. We can't do that. Okay, we're contractually obligated. Because we have once offered them that, it's in their contract, we have to continue to offer them that. So we're, there are certain things that, like, common sense wise would say, this is a great area for us to make some significant cuts to save our budget, and we can't do it. Before about transportation and, having our own director. Well, Mr. Birkenstock had mentioned, that we're keeping that person for a multitude of reasons. We have inefficiency right now. Okay. We're hemorrhaging right now with contracted rates where we're not even using our own drivers at times. So we need control over that situation. And we're also looking at our courtesy busing that we're offering and maybe going to subscription busing. We are definitely being creative, and we're looking at everything that we can to try to get the cost down.
Yeah,
For all new contracts, are you having are there, for all new contracts now, is like, for example, benefits are up the roof.
Why don't you hand him the mic so
So, for example, you mentioned the Cadillac plan for all contracts for teachers, right? Can't change the past. The past is the past. For the future now, I don't get the Cadillac. I have the Cadillac at work, right? So are we contractually saying to those employees, hey, look, you are welcome to have the Cadillac plan, but it's gonna cost X amount?
not until we can have
All the-
like, our next, contract negotiations, right? So
2027, and our teachers, so we have to be careful when we talk about
Well, I don't want
maintaining our high quality teachers. We also want to make sure that we're offering them benefits and a salary package so we can recruit
Yeah.
and maintain our high quality teachers. Because if we don't offer them the 3%, 3.25, guess what? They're going to go right down the road to Reddington or East Amwell or Delaware Township, and they're going to work there, which is part of the reason that the board settled on this 3%, 3.25 to maintain our teachers here.
I agree with the fact that we have to retain the teachers. Again, our students are, our kids are the crop, they're the future, right? I'm not stating the fact that contractually that the teachers that are currently in the system, I'm more speaking of the teachers that are coming up who are younger. For example, a 25 or 30-year-old is not gonna need a Cadillac plan.
They're not eligible for it.
Oh, okay, so 35-year-old, whatever you want to, I don't know. People are living to 80 nowadays, so whatever that age is, please, again, do not hold me to the numbers. I am using numbers. If you want me to use X and Y's, I'm great at that too. I'll use X and Y if you like.
So
But-
we do, just to add to what was said, we do offer lower cost plans so that when we do have staff members that are younger, maybe we don't automatically have one plan and say everyone, because this is what it is. The contract states that we have to offer a certain level. But we also do offer other levels as well. So if someone, because our teachers do pay, so if we offer a lower cost plan, And we have someone that may be a little bit more sensitive to that, where they're like, listen, I want insurance. This is going to work for me at a lower rate. We do. We offer a high deductible plan. We offer, lower cost plans. Offer just the Cadillac plan. We do offer 5 different plans that our staff get to choose from, but it's a choice. We mandate certain things, right? So that's just kind of where it goes in. But we offer certain things to try to make it attractive and, to try to lower our costs. One of the other things the district offers are, benefit waivers. So if your spouse it has a insurance and you don't necessarily need to be covered here, we offer up to a $5,000 incentive, right? So that way you're not, because if without that, you can have your spouse, so you can be double covered, right? And it's great, but we do offer an incentive plan. So again, in areas that we are able, or we try to see where we can see savings and offer and cut costs, we try to do it within the confines of the restrictions that we have.
I would just say, like you said, just go back and then start from there.
Yeah, maybe over here. She's been waiting a long time.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I've had 2 kids go through the system. I work in a neighboring school district in purchasing, and I've been there about 7 years. And one of the things coming from corporate my whole life, going to a school district, I'm sure you're aware who Jim Shoup is. He's kind of the guru of public school purchasing. This guy teaches all the classes at Rutgers. He knows everything there is to know about purchasing. A little over the top, but he knows everything about purchasing. And basically, I come home every night pretty much sick how much money is wasted. Like my husband's like, quit that damn job. You're just miserable, because it's just a horrible, horrible thing to see. Yes, it's not your money, it's our money. And nobody cares. No, the expense. And Jim Shoup, when I started there, said to me, your job is no longer to save money. Your job is to be in compliance. So school districts, I'm sorry, but I completely disagree with you guys. Do whatever you can to save money. It's all about being in compliance. And the law does make it difficult for school districts, but there is so much money wasted. It is absolutely sickening. And again, that gentleman with the teachers, it's never about the teachers, it's the admin. And the admin are this perfectly little protected bureaucracy. They never get let go. They never get let go. And there's 2 and 3 and 4, and they're chained down. And you know what? They get to work at 8 o'clock and they leave at 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Anybody here that works in corporate does not leave the office at 5 o'clock. So again, it's more a comment, but I see this every day, and it's a very equivalent district, and it makes me sick. So sorry to be that, but it's what I see every day.
Okay, we recognize that there's a lot of waste. We see it nationally, what's happening in our national news, and everybody is looking to see where can you trim? Where is this extra fat? Our building principals sit down with me and with Tanya and with our assistant superintendent, and we go through the budget line by line by line by line. And we have many of our school secretaries that are sitting in the audience with us tonight who also do the budget with their building principals. And I would challenge that I bet that they would state that there is no extra, there is no fat, there is no wasteful spending. The things that we're eliminating from the budget to help reduce the budget are very difficult choices. It's not easy to eliminate personnel that our students count on. And to counter a bit about administrators, we let go 3 administrators. And we let go a facility manager who is also a manager, and those are very difficult. So administrators do get cut. We have to still pick up that workload. When we talk about compliance, yes, we're still going to be held to compliance about New Jersey Department of Education and New Jersey student learning standards, and still doing our testing and still changing our standards. When the Department of Ed says you got to change the math standards, you got to change the language arts standards, we still have to do all that work. It still remains.
So I'm not sure if there's a time check, but I have 3 questions waiting here. Okay, thank you for waiting.
Hi, Bill Toplitz, Raritan. I have a daughter in the school district.
Hi.
Looking at the numbers, we're gonna be somewhere close to 3 million shy in the budget this year.
Mhm.
And Mr. Birkenstock was talking about a 5-year budget plan going forward in the future. That number's gonna compound over the next 5 years, correct? What guardrails?
Again, I'm sorry.
we're gonna be in a deficit. The 4% is gonna be approximately 3 million shy, was it? In change? And you were talking about a budget over 5 years, correct?
Mhm.
That number's just gonna compound dramatically over the next 5 years.
Yep.
You stated that, in 5 years, something changes on the school funding. I don't think that we should be worried about school funding. I think we gotta worry about today and what guardrails are gonna be put in place, so we're not sitting here next year and the following year, because what we're doing is not working. With the
Understood.
numbers that we have, there has to be some sort of change involved. Just back and praying that we get more state money is not the solution.
Yep, understood, and I agree. We're going out for a 4% raise, right, of 2.4 million, let's just call it. We're still gonna be having to cut millions of dollars, and we've started that process, and we're gonna continue with that process. But we're talking about another $3-4+ million that need to be cut at a minimum, right? And again, when our contracted salaries and I don't, it sounds like when I say this, it sounds like I'm trying to pin the blame on our salaries. Like, that's not the case, right? I think our teachers should get more money, right? But that's just unfortunately not the reality. But when we have our contractor salaries and our benefits that are already more than double what we're allowed to actually raise our taxes, what are we going to do, right? Other than cut half the staff, right? Let's cut half the staff, and then ultimately, yeah, I guess our salaries and our benefits aren't going to be that bad, but then we're cutting half of our staff. Is that realistic? Probably not. But we're doing what we can. I mean, we will get here
The
again.
amount of new construction going within the next
I
5
agree.
years, the
I agree.
population's gonna boom.
Yeah, and it's a major issue, and we talked about this with our township representatives. You know, these pilot programs and things like that are being put in place. There's some in Raritan Township that have already been put in place, and then Flemington's already bringing them in as well. The school district doesn't get any money from those, so we're paying for, you know, let's just say $20,000 a kid. That's a significant amount of money that we're getting zero tax revenue from, and that hurts our district significantly. But that's, you know, we can't do anything about that.
Oh, I understand.
You know, and we still, you know, we have an obligation to teach, you know, the children of this district, and again, our hands are tied to it in a lot of cases. So it's
Just doesn't
We're
sound like
working
there's
on
a
it.
solution going forward.
the solution is to take a look at it, right? And cut the positions as much as we can. I don't want to say cut the fat, that there is no, we've cut all the supplies, we've cut all this stuff, and we've gotten down to the point where we're cutting these positions. And it's trying to strategically do that, where we're not trying to impact the children as much as possible. And that sounds so silly because every position impacts the children, right? And we hate doing it. It's terrible. But that's what we're looking at right now. You know, we're looking at trying to just budget responsibly again, you know, moving
What I
forward.
hear a lot from everyone is, it's, okay, we give you this referendum now, and then you keep coming back and coming back and coming back. There isn't an end game in this whole.
There won't be an end game. I'm going to be very honest with you. Again, if this will happen again at some point, whether it's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen in the next 5 years. We will eventually run out of money, because if you're held at 2%, the math simply does not add up. Inflation will be higher than 2%. The math does not add up.
And that's
We
why
will be here again. And I've said it 100 times.
I think our legislators do know the problem. We've already
Whether they do
seen
anything about it is a
that,
different
well, they
story.
did do something. We saw that they passed a stabilization law. So that means that a school district cannot receive 3%. Help me, Mrs. Dawson, they can't receive 3% more than, or less
Less
than.
Less
Less
than
than
what they
their-
received the year before.
before.
Yeah, but you can argue that that's hurting districts like ours.
That is,
Right.
that is hurting.
So it's, the
districts.
the legislation is not
But-
helping Flemington-Raritan School
That's
District. It's
correct.
not. We need new leadership is what we need. And,
That's true.
until we have, people come to the table and do real legislation that's going to help our districts, then we'll be able to get out of this mess. The state funding should be covering special education. It is one of the largest costs of our district. And
And
it's
the
not.
transportation.
Yeah.
So if you get real legislative changes like that, then we will not be having this conversation year after year.
And I just want to add one thing. When last year when we raised the taxes, we made reductions as well. One of the things we recognize is it's not just to say we want more money and we're not looking within our own budget. We're still making reductions because we realize that the level of spending that we have right now cannot be sustained. So we continue to look at the budget to see items that we can reduce. Last year, we reduced over 30 positions and we still raised the taxes, right? This year, we're looking to do the same. We're looking to get an increase in taxes while still reducing expenditures within the budget. It's not that we're just looking, it's a hand me and, I hear it all, across town that we're not ATMs. No, we're not. We're not. And we're not treating that, we're not treating this like that, right? We want to be respectable, respectful of the spending, right? That's one of the things we looked at is we can't continue on this path. When we talk about going back to the budget and seeing where those items are, that's what we're doing. We're trying to see exactly what led those trends, right? We're going back to see where that spending is. And we recognize we still have to make cuts. And that's what the district is doing. It's not just we're asking for more money and we're just going to sit here and do nothing. We are seeking to ask for more money and we are making reductions. Whether that question passes or not, the district is making reductions.
My question was actually going to be the same. So I said, no, that's okay. I think it's an important, I certainly don't want to be redundant to what this gentleman shared, but, I think and I want to preface this by saying, I think all of you are working incredibly hard to try to do the best you can do with the situation that you were given. And I know it's very likely so gut wrenching to try to make the decisions you have to make, especially when you're cutting teachers and that impacts kids. And I'm inclined to vote yes, because I have almost soon to be three kids in the district. And obviously as a parent, I don't want to see my own kids and my friends' kids and any kids not have the programs that they need to be successful or lose their favorite teachers. And I think all of us in this room can agree that if our teachers could make $1 million a year, we would all vote yes for that because they're incredible. I think, just looking at things on Facebook and on social media, I think there's a lot of things you're probably up against as a board. And I think one is the misinformation. I think some other folks commented on that. I do think a lot of that comes from, and this is not, to disrespect anyone. I think in general, folks not understand the intricacies and the complexities of a school budget because it is very complex. Certain funds can only go to certain things, and we can't use leftover referendum money that was pinned for an air conditioning for salaries. And I think, the average person might not have an understanding of that. And Mrs. Dawson, over these meetings over the past several years, I think you've done a wonderful job trying to help everybody better understand that. The slideshows are great, and you've gone through a lot of these types of things with different line items and different examples and things like that. I think keep doing that, keep, allowing people to better understand. But I think mostly it's that trust piece that this gentleman shared too. I think the overall feeling is if I vote yes, I'm scared that in 3-4 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, I'm going to be asked for this again. And that's hard. That's hard to really stomach. So, Mr. Birkenstock and Dr. Bentley, I know it seems like you're working on a 5-year plan. You talked about that a couple of times in these meetings. And I know there's likely not going to be another town hall before the vote, but I think that's probably the piece that might make the community feel better, whether they vote yes or not, just, going ahead with the budget that you have and looking at, I know talk about courtesy busing, things like that. If you were able, and I'm not going to ask you to do that in the next 30 seconds, but, in future meetings like this or on the newsletters that Dr. McGann, that you send out to the community, just outlining the types of things that you will be looking at going forward, in order to just restore that trust in the community that if the money is provided at this time and we keep, the security officers and we keep all of those things, I think the public needs to just be assured that it's not going to go unnoticed and it's not going to be asked again in a couple of years. And to your point, Dr. Birkenstock, it's like, there's nothing you can do about it, because a lot of this comes from federal money and the state, and there's so much out of your control and contracts and tenure and all of those things. But a little bit of trust, I think, could be reassured in the community. I think that would go over really well with folks.
Yeah, and I agree. And that is a big piece and like something that we're trying to be transparent with to build that trust with everyone here, which is why we're all sitting up here. That's a big piece of it. I agree 100%. I will say, you know, we kind of touched on it before with some of the things that we're looking at. We get a lot of emails, right, with a lot of great suggestions. And I can assure you that a lot of them, I'd say probably 90% of the things that are suggested to us, we have already started taking a look at. But then there's that other 10% like, oh man, I didn't think of that. That's really good. And boom, what do I, you know, hey, let's take a look at this, right? We are looking at all these creative things that, you know, you guys talk about, the courtesy busing, you know, we offer that now. We're looking at potentially making it a subscription busing. You're taking away the courtesy busing and making it a subscription busing. Outsourcing positions. You know, I can't get into all the things that we're talking about because it obviously affects people's jobs, right? But I promise you, we are looking at everything that is suggested to us, and everything that we can try to come up with.
I just want to add to the trust and thank you for sharing that we've got some work to do to build the trust. That is part of the reason why we've had 3 town halls and also why we're sharing data all the way back from 2007 and 8. It's also why we have all of our user-friendly budgets on our district website all the way back from 2010. It's also why we have all of our contracts, mine included, the superintendent included, Mrs. Dawson's included on the website, job descriptions. If you visit a neighboring district, I bet you won't find all that. I bet you won't find all the contracts. I bet you won't find all the easy budgets 15 years back. I bet you won't find all the job descriptions. And that's not something new. Flemington-Raritan has had those trust documents before I was superintendent. We've just continued with that pattern. But I do recognize that the district needs to understand how, and the community, how are we moving forward with this 2% funding restriction? And we've got and healthcare benefits that are exceeding that 2% growth. And the math doesn't add up. That's right. Okay.
Thank you. I have a question and a comment. My question is, what do we spend for 1 year about?
About $7 million.
Transportation.
Okay, so then my question would be, my B question would be, we had schools closed for an entire year during COVID. $7 million. Where is it?
Great question. So those buses had to run anyway. When we had schools that kids were back in session, not when we were totally closed, the buses didn't run.
Hold on.
We still had contracts.
I had 3 kids that were in the system.
Yep.
In this system. I've had a daughter who taught here at JPK's. I see everybody saying, give me more money, give me more money, give me more money. At the head of our country, we're watching people go through and say, you're spending our money and it's not right. So if you did not spend $7 million in busing for a year, why does that not come back to the people? Why are the rates not lower? You're worried about having supervisors for transportation over a teacher. It's very frustrating to me to just, every time I turn around, Murphy's raising our bills. You guys want to raise our taxes. Well, not everybody works. Not everybody can work.
True.
So I want to go back quickly to transportation. One of the things when COVID happened and we had to shut down, the state did not allow us to stop paying our staff or our contractors.
Or the bus drivers.
They all had to get paid.
If they don't drive.
They got paid during
got paid.
COVID. They got paid during COVID. Anyone who did not come into the buildings got paid during COVID. Look that one up. And not only did they get paid, our contractors who we contract out with, who was not running any of our students picking them up, they also got paid. And we were told by the state of New Jersey, we had to pay those obligations. We didn't see any savings from that.
So our budget was down, right? That's the slide that's up there. We were down 3.7% operating budget. But that doesn't sense. I recognize that, but we were held to that requirement by the state. We still had to pay people, even though the buses weren't driving down the road. And when I talked about kids were still getting on the bus, that's when we were coming back half day. And the buses weren't full, right? Some kids weren't
understand,
riding
but
the buses, but the
even-
buses still had to go on all those routes.
But even if you're paying bus drivers to sit at home, you're not using any gas at $3,
So-
$4, $5
So
a gallon.
just that, I'm not playing on my phone here. My computer died, so I apologize for everybody out there. And, but transportation costs, I was just pulling up the numbers here really quick. 5.1 million in 21, 5.4 million in 22, 5.5 million in 23, and then 6.7 million in 24. So, you know, the costs have increased substantially. You see a huge jump from 5.5 to 6.7. That's a major increase in 23 to 24. And then now we budget around $7 million dollars, give or take. But again, we were paying that $5.5 million even during COVID. So, you know, can't answer your question of the gas or whatever it is. We were still paying them. The fact of the matter is the money is the money.
We, as Americans and as people of this county, we have to budget our bank books every day. And we know exactly what we have. And all we do is say, here you go, here you go, here you go. And it's never enough. At what point do we say enough is enough? I understand teachers have contracts and I would never want to take that away from them. They do an amazing job. I have a daughter-in-law who teaches the special needs. Her job was here. Her job was cut. So, you know, I know there are cuts, but giving everybody a raise just because it's contractual, there has to be something. Just because it's been the same way for 50 years doesn't mean that it's the right way. How about looking at it from another point of view, like from other people in this audience that aren't making six figures, that still have a 6.2% increase that you guys want to instill in our budget and in my account? I don't think that's fair. And I'm not speaking for everybody here, but I can't imagine that anybody would say, no, please take my extra money. I think, I think you guys are doing your job, but to what degree? There's no clarity for us. It's just give me more money, give me more money, give me more money. And we aren't ATMs either.
I think
I
that's
agree.
what it's about. It's about giving the choice back to the taxpayer. So
Which
we
is
were
what we're
asked
doing.
last year, put it up for a vote. If the community wants smaller class sizes, if they want class 3 officers in every school, if they want JV sports, this is what it costs to do that.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is, again, it goes back to the state funding and the formula that's in place, that the state puts the burden on the local community. I mean, how else is our districts are supposed to raise money? Yeah, we can advertise. Yeah, we can do a little bit here and there. That's all well and good. And grants, that's fine. But the vast majority of our budget, I don't know the percentage,
Salaries
but
and
90% of
Yeah.
our budget, give or take.
About a
Ms. Dawson?
fixed cost there.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I'm saying is on our local taxpayers specifically.
90% of
90
our budget is funded by local
Right,
taxpayers.
so 90%. I mean, that's not our decision. The state forces us to do that, right? And meanwhile, you have more money going to, $1.2 billion going to Newark, and we get 5 million. Now it's
greater
what
than
it is.
90%. It's
We don't like it.
6 million out of
We're all
85.
residents too. We don't like our taxes going up.
So one of the
Unfortunate
things,
reality.
I think the flexibility, and I do respect that perspective, and thank you for speaking that, because I think that's important to hear the voices of everyone here. It's just it always brings things, we want to hear all sides of everything. But, one of the things that we're able to do at home is we are able to cut costs, right? We are able to look at, okay, we're not going to do this one day. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do this. We're able to control those costs a little bit more. One of the things that in districts we are not able to do is if I get a special ed student that comes to me in October that requires an out-of-district placement that's costing me $150,000, doesn't include busing, we don't have the right to turn them away. If I get a student or there's any other,
There's a pilot program where there's 50 kids coming out of the
we
development.
don't have control over those types of items, right? Well, if we get an increase of 20 students that come knocking on our door tomorrow, we can't turn them away. We have to educate them, and our students are coming to us with a lot of different needs. Our job is, we're not a private school. We can't be selective in who comes in and who doesn't come in. Right now, we're responsible for paying or educating everyone that comes to us. And right now it's, our demographics are different today than what they were 5 years ago, than what they were 10 years ago. Again, and I know it sounds, we've heard it over again, and I go to costs that I can easily, because it did happen this school year. You know, the last 3 to 4 years, we had an average of maybe 1 to 2 new out-of-district placements happen. This school year alone, since the month of September and October, I think September we saw our first, October we saw 2 more. We've had 4 out-of-district placements that came into our district that's costing us over $500,000, not including transportation. We don't have a right to say no. We have to find that money. So when we get questioned on why is the budget going over, you know, why can't we stay within the budget? These are some of the reasons why we can't. We have contingencies built into the budget. And there are times when things happen that throws those contingencies out, right? We don't have enough built into the budget to account for some of the expenses that are happening. I mean, these are some of the realities we're dealing with right now.
So what I'm getting out is that 90% of the budget is from local taxpayers. So that's only 10% of state budget that we use or we need.
Absolutely.
We can't really blame the state that much then, to be honest with you.
Well,
90% of the budget being local taxpayers, okay? There was a mismanagement of budget that was done from the last 5 years, I can clearly tell, just by that data. There was a ball dropped. Secondly, this pamphlet, it's such a good pamphlet, whoever made it. Why is this not being sent home with the students? So the parents are more educated. This is critical information that people are not getting. This should be sent home with the students before the vote goes in. Can this be sent? I mean, they're printed out and laid out here. Why can't they be sent with the students? If I'm telling my neighbor their house is $400,000, they're only paying $5 extra a month. If my house is $600,000, I'm only paying $32 extra a month. To make sure, I understand that. I completely understand that. But no, I do, because if my house is $400,000, $5 extra, I'm telling you this just because my kids are in the school district, and I have obviously, you know, more to gain, and to see that they're going to be kids that are with special needs that are going to be dropped through the cracks because people are upset because the taxes are going up. That's just but I'm just saying this is critical information. People can do with whatever they want to vote. I'm not saying, I'm just saying that this information, because there's so much misinformation outside right now.
Yes.
But this should be sent home.
It's in the works. The person who gets credit for that beautiful brochure is sitting on your right. That's Mrs. Brown. And we don't send those to a publisher. So the person and the people who print all those and fold them are Mrs. Brune and myself and school secretaries, and they're busy, but it is part of the things that we're sending out in the next 2 weeks before the vote.
Yes.
So that's first.
And then one more thing.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then we're going to let somebody else
Yes,
who hasn't had their
absolutely.
first chance to ask a question, because
Absolutely.
you've had twice.
So,
But thank you.
Mr. Birkenstock, there are 2 questions. One was that you mentioned in the previous budget, repairs were not added or forecasted for the upcoming years. How is it possible? They were not forecasted? That tells me that there's a ball that was dropped with the budget.
What wasn't forecasted? I'm sorry, what did you say?
Repairs.
Oh, repairs. Okay.
So, you know, especially with SR funding, if it was ending, right? That's just clear as day. That's black and white almost, I'll be honest with you. Secondly, what if the budget increase vote doesn't pass? What's your plan B? That's not even including 33 teachers that are going to. That's going to be more because it's going to be compounding in the next 5 years, like you were saying. And I agree with you, it's going to compound. So if that doesn't pass, I mean,
what's gonna happen? What are you guys gonna do if that budget increase doesn't pass?
Can I answer your questions now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let's start. I talked about the brochures. So you talked about what wasn't forecasted and we said repairs. The board does have a long-range facility plan. We do have repairs forecasted. When we looked at a previous slide, we talked about the partial repair of the Riffus roof. Then we passed the referendum and that paid for a lot of our repairs. We still have about $2 million left in our referendum money to be able to do repairs, but that does not include the JP Case roof or the JP Case basketball gymnasium floor, because that was not included in the referendum. So we do forecast repairs. The previous budget, the previous board, the previous superintendents did have a plan for repairs, but there wasn't enough money to do extensive work. They did patchwork on our roofs, small repairs at a section, and even those cost a lot of money. Let's talk about what if the budget doesn't pass. If the budget doesn't pass, we are reducing 30 teachers, all class 3 officers, and JV sports. Even if the budget passes, we still have to reduce positions. We reduced supervisors at the last board meeting. The board meeting tomorrow night has 4 more teachers, as well as 2 guidance counselors, as well as a facility manager. There are more positions that have to be reduced that the board and I are still discussing that will be part of the preliminary budget. So you're right. The fact of the matter is that if that question doesn't pass, it's a lot of more people who are going to lose their position. And yes, every year we're going to have to trim away the higher cost of the districts. That's salaries, healthcare, transportation, special education, buildings, and maintenance. Those are our 5 biggest. And the only way we can trim benefits is reducing staff. We do that some through attrition. People retire. We try to hire teachers on the beginning of our salary guide, but that doesn't work anymore. Why doesn't that work? Because of the national teacher shortage. We do not get teachers that come in right now on step 1. Very rarely. If you look at the board agenda, you'll see they're coming in on step 8, step 9, because they're transferring from other districts and they're not taking step 2 or 3 like they used to do before the national teacher shortage, because there's too many open spots and not enough teachers. So how do you trim the budget when you're trying to keep teachers in place of those 5 largest areas? I think I answered all your questions. I appreciate your comments. It is a very challenging situation for sure. Okay, let's go over here because she didn't have a chance yet. And then over there, we need to do a virtual question because we haven't answered and we're watching the time. I appreciate everybody being here later than 7. Thank you.
I just have a comment, which goes back to what Mrs. Dawson was saying. This is not a private school. So when I see a number close to $20,000 for each student to educate them, that's pretty disheartening. It's a public school district, and for it to cost that much, there is something wrong. And it sounds like your hands are completely tied by whatever guidance there is, whatever rules, regulations there are in place. But if we could all just take our taxes back and go to private school with that instead, because I pay almost the 19 grand for my own kid to go in my taxes, then why can't we just do that? So I guess my question is, what can we do about the issues with tenure and the issues with governmental policies to change them, to stop the contract increases that we are bound by? Because to this gentleman's point over here, not everyone gets a raise. That's not how the world works. So what can we do? What can we do as citizens with the government, with anything else to try to get out of just continuing to pay more?
I'll start. It's an election year.
Yeah.
Choose your legislators, your governor, who are going to look at the schools and make the schools a part of us. Have a solution for the schools. And so it's very important who you vote for.
Elections matter. That's what it comes down to.
And as a board, we are a very active board, and we passed 2 resolutions to the legislators. We have met with the legislators. We have met with Raritan Township. We'll be meeting with Flemington Borough. So we are trying to get out and get help in different ways.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that. And you pretty much said exactly what I was thinking. You know, elections do matter, right? Alls I've heard, you know, and when we sat there with our legislators last year around this time, it was, you know, a lot of listening, a lot of talk. Yeah, we're going to do this. And guess what? Nothing's done. So it's very disheartening when you see that over and over and over and over again, right? This has been an issue that has been years in the making. They've known about this for years and they've continued to do absolutely nothing about it. So elections matter. Consider that when you go to vote in November.
We have a question on this side here.
Hi, I'm lucky enough that I am both a taxpayer and I work for the district. I've been quietly watching Facebook and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding about the we're not asking for a 4% tax increase. We're asking for a 4% budget increase on top of what we're allowed to ask. So it's really, it's not like I'm going to take the amount of money that I'm paying for my taxes and multiply that by 0.04 and add that on.
So it is a tax increase.
Right.
But
it's not,
it's, you know, let's just say you pay 10 right now of taxes, easy numbers, right? We're not raising it by $400. We are a piece of your local taxes, right?
Right.
Us, Hunterdon Central, your municipality, your county, we are a piece of that. So we may be raising it 6%. Let's just say hypothetically, the town raises it 1%, right? There's going to be some offset in there.
but it's not my taxes that are getting raised 6%. It's the budget that's getting raised 6%, correct?
But it's the tax.
Yeah, no, it definitely, it is coming out of the taxes, but my
Right.
point is that it's the percentage of your tax is a lot less when it's 6% of the budget as opposed to 6% of your taxes.
No, it's a 6% tax increase. The
Okay.
budget increase is not necessarily related.
But it's a 6% increase on line item.
I'm just for the schools.
Correct, right? So I agree. And again, we are a piece of that, right? So, and you know, everybody went up $1,000. I agree. I mean, again, we're all residents here as well. This district, this board did not cause your taxes to go up that $1,000. Again, we are a piece of that. And I'm not denying it. But it is a tax increase, right? We get, let's just say $60 million from our tax levy. That will be going up 6% if passed.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding, so what the part of my taxes that go to the schools is raising by 6%.
That's correct.
It's not my total taxes.
That's correct.
Okay. The other thing that I have, only because this was mentioned last time, I've been at all the town halls and it was again mentioned this time, I am an employee of the district. And I just want to make sure that it's known, we do pay for our benefits. They're not
Yes.
free. I pay $1,000 for my benefits.
Right.
So I just want to have that kind of on the record for people to
Nope,
hear.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Absolutely.
that's it.
Thank you.
Do you want to take a virtual?
Does anybody?
Unfortunately, my computer died. Sorry.
Okay, let's go over here and I'll
So
check.
I have two here and Jacqueline has one?
Yes.
No, Jacqueline has one.
If the question doesn't pay, middle school sports are cut from the budget, will it be offered in a pay to play format or will they be entirely cut?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, Mr. Lasano was telling me another virtual question to answer.
If the question doesn't pass and middle school sports are cut from the budget, will it be offered in a pay to play format or will it be cut entirely?
So first, it's not all middle school sports, it's junior varsity. So varsity sports would stay. And could the JV team, if the question doesn't pass, potentially be a pay to play? I heard we already do a pay to play. That decision would have to go to somebody higher than me. That would go to the executive superintendent and probably the Department of Ed. My guess would be likely no, because we put it out for a question that said, if you want this, this is how much it's going to cost. I will pose the question and ask the superintendent, executive superintendent. He'll probably have to ask the Department of Ed.
Yeah, what I'll say to that is that as a board, we would support that, right? We would 100% support that being an option. But Whether we're able to do it or not, I simply don't know. So we'll have to check into that.
Okay, so let me just respond to one of the questions. So Mr. Lozano is helping us watch the virtual questions, and he said there's a lot of questions about the pilot funding and what happens in town with pilot money. We talked a little bit about that. Mr. Birkenstock talked about that. We talked about that the school does not receive any money for pilot programs. We have about 95 students that live in our community that are involved in these pilot programs. And for those students, we do not receive the same amount of funding as if they lived elsewhere. We have no control over that. That is our township. And it also comes from higher ed. So if you're listening to what the governor is talking about, he says that they're expanding the areas of affordable housing in New Jersey, and it comes from a law that was passed years ago. Many places have to have affordable housing.
Yep, I think the main thing with the pilot programs is that the school districts are not a part of that process.
Yeah.
No one comes to us, no one asks, we don't have input, we don't get details to the pilot programs. The pilot programs, when they're agreed upon, are exclusive of the school district. We do not have information on them. We're not privy to information on it. They don't consider us in them. So again, I know that's been part of the question. What's happening with these pilot programs? Again, that goes to your, if you're a Raritan Township, it's going to Raritan Township Municipal. You're going to take that up with them there. And if you're a borough resident, you're going to take the borough. They're the ones that approve the pilot programs. And they, again, since the little information that I have, I don't think we've had anyone come to us and ask us, how is this pilot program going to affect you? And they are affecting the school
Yeah,
district.
and that's why we want to meet with our, our township leaders, the borough leaders, and we already have in Raritan Township's case, just to get in the back of their head, like, listen, guys, our budget's hurting, right? When you're thinking about doing these, please include us, right? That's why, we're having these conversations with them, so we can hopefully be included in these in these discussions if and when they do happen. And hopefully, ideally, we get some kind of funding from it. So, but
Excuse me, I have two comments and a question. First comment, as far as voting goes, I don't know if you guys know because I had no idea, but the preliminary debates happened 3 weeks ago, and they are both Republican and Democrat on YouTube, so you can watch the debates. They did touch on school stuff. Second comment is I have 3 kids. One of them is now out of your district, 2 are in your district. The one that went to Hunterdon Central, he had to walk. And so as far as subscription busing goes, I'm not a fan of that idea. And then my question is, and I apologize, I was not here earlier, so it may have been asked, but do you guys have any plans of capping salaries, especially for like the board or any of your higher paid employees?
just to be clear, as far as the board, we do not make any money at all. So,
Well,
Those are volunteer
our
positions.
superintendent does.
these are contracted salaries right now, right? We are up for negotiations soon across the board with everything. That being said, these are discussions that are going to be had.
Okay,
Potentially.
because I know Dr. McGann has a significant salary and our Attorney General, Matt Platkin, he is capped at $175,000 a year. And he's our Attorney General. So I didn't know if there was a plan.
Yeah, I believe years ago there
was
a
a cap in
cap
Jersey.
specifically for superintendents, I believe,
Yes.
right? So there was a cap, and I believe it was, I don't know the details behind it, but I guess you couldn't.
It was
Yeah,
removed
it was
because
removed.
superintendents were leaving the state of New
Right.
Jersey and going to New York and other states. And specifically for my salary, I receive a 2% increase.
Yeah.
Which not very high. Percent. And my contract's on the district website. There's no car, much like what everybody believes. There's no car in my contract. It's a 2% increase.
Yeah. So, but again, we are looking across the board at all of these things.
I'm not thrilled that FRC lost blue ribbon status. I'm not particularly thrilled that students with test scores in the 25% range don't qualify for special ed services. I'm not convinced that there's not some unnecessary administrative positions. I'm also not convinced that the financial foresight of our district is particularly grand. However, I will vote yes. Yes, because our school cannot function optimally if we lose another 30 teachers. I will vote yes, because I believe our 3,000 plus students are worth a tax increase equal to $32 per month. I will vote yes, because the future of our community is sitting in a classroom. Investing in public schools reduces crime, reduces unemployment, and enhances civic engagement. Investing in public schools leads to better job opportunities, healthier community members, economic development, and house values.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's 5 after 8. I want to thank everybody for coming. We ask that you vote on March 11th. We will update our FAQ document. We've got frequently asked questions both virtually and here tonight that we'll update and post again online. Thank you all for coming and being part of this town hall.